At the will reading, they smiled. My sister got 7 million, my parents got their pride, and me? They turned to me and said, "Go earn your own." I didn't cry, I didn't flinch, I just stared at the polished table, pretending I couldn't hear my pulse pounding in my ears. But then something shifted. A man in a gray suit stood up and said, "There's one more letter." And that envelope changed everything. It unraveled every lie they'd told, and it led me back to a barn no one mentioned, a place my grandfather built in secret. For me, the reading of the will felt more like a staged performance than a legal proceeding. The air was too still, the walls too polished, the smiles too rehearsed. We sat in the office of Whitaker and Doyle, a firm as old and unfeeling as the mahogany table we all surrounded. I hadn't seen my parents in over a year, and now they barely looked at me. My sister Brielle, in her usual designer chic, crossed her legs and flipped her hair like she owned the place, which, as it turned out, she thought she did. "To my granddaughter Brielle Rhodes," the lawyer said, clearing his throat, "a check in the amount of $7 million. Brielle smirked. My mother clapped softly. My father adjusted his cufflinks like he was closing a business deal. Then all heads turned to me. The lawyer looked back at his documents, flipped a page, paused. "And to my granddaughter Madeline Rhodes." There was a long silence. "There is a secondary document." Everyone stiffened. A second lawyer, older and slower, pulled out a weathered envelope. My name was written on it in my grandfather's hand. I knew that script. It used to write me letters when I was away at school, filled with clippings about soil science and honeybee behavior. The moment that envelope hit the table, the mood shifted. My mother's polite smile disappeared. My father's knuckles turned white. Brielle's eyes narrowed like someone had just changed the rules of a game she'd already won. The lawyer nodded. "Per Mr. Henry Rhodes's instructions, this letter is to be read aloud only in the presence of all family members, and at the original family homestead in Maple Hollow, Vermont." My pulse thundered. The homestead. I hadn't set foot there since the summer before Grandpa got sick, since everything changed. The lawyer folded his hands. "We will reconvene there in 72 hours. Mr. Rhodes left very specific instructions." Brielle scoffed. "Seriously? This couldn't be handled here, in a real office?" The older lawyer looked directly at her. He believed certain truths needed to be heard where they began. Outside, the wind howled against the windows like a warning. I didn't speak. I just stared at the letter. For years, I'd been treated like the ghost of the Rhodes family. Not rebellious enough to be the problem child, not obedient enough to be the favorite, just invisible, forgotten. But that envelope, that one worn, handwritten envelope, felt like someone reaching through the silence to say, "I saw you, I still do." 3 days later, I would drive back to Maple Hollow. To the cracked white door, the creaking porch swing, the overgrown magnolias. Back to the place they thought I'd never return to. But this time, I wouldn't be coming home for them. I'd be coming home for me. And for the truth that refused to stay buried. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I turned onto the old winding road that led to the farmhouse. It had been almost 2 years since I'd been back, but nothing about it looked different, except me. The front porch sagged a little more than I remembered, and the once bright red barn out back had faded to a dull rust. The wind moved through the trees like it remembered me, but I wasn't sure I belonged anymore. I parked the car and sat for a moment, hands clenched on the steering wheel, breath held like a question I wasn't ready to ask. When I finally stepped out, the scent hit me, wild mint, pine, and something older, memory maybe. I knocked once, then again. The door creaked open, and there she was, Grandma Edith, standing in her worn sweater, silver hair pulled tight, her eyes sharper than I ever remembered, arms crossed, jaw locked. "Well," she said, voice cool as the Vermont autumn, "look who decided to come back." My throat tightened. "Hi, Grandma." She didn't move, didn't soften. "Your grandfather waited for you," she said. "He asked for you every single day." I blinked hard. I didn't know he was sick, no one told me. "He called for you. He thought you'd show up." Her voice cracked, just for a second. "And when you didn't, he thought maybe you just didn't care." Something inside me shattered. "That's not true," I whispered. "I came in March. Brielle said no one was home." Grandma's face twisted, confused. "We were here. We were always here." The silence stretched, thick and heavy like the dust in the corners of the porch. Then she turned and walked inside without another word. I followed. Every step through the hallway felt like walking through a life I'd left behind without meaning to. The faded wallpaper, the creaky floorboards, the grandfather clock still ticking like nothing ever stopped. Grandma returned from the living room with something in her hand, a small leather notepad. "This," she said, handing it to me, "is the number he kept dialing, day and night, even when the nurses told him to rest." I looked at it. My chest turned ice. This isn't my number, I said. Not even close. I haven't changed it since college. Her eyebrows knit together, deepening the lines time had already carved. They told us you did, she said, voice low. Said you didn't want to be contacted, that you'd moved on, that you were ashamed of us. No, I whispered, backing into the kitchen wall like it could catch me. They lied. They cut me off. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter. She looked so small in that moment, so defeated. I would have been there, I said. For the funeral. I showed up at the church. Brielle told me it was at noon. Grandma's face went pale. The funeral was at 9. It felt like someone had punched the air out of me. She told everyone you didn't show, Grandma added quietly. Said you were too busy. I closed my eyes. I couldn't stop the tears this time. I would never have missed it. Never. The room fell into silence. The kind that didn't beg to be filled. The kind that carried weight. And then she reached for my hand. Just once. Just enough. I believe you now, she said. That's what matters. We sat in that broken kitchen for a long time, not speaking, just holding on to whatever remained between us. Outside, the wind picked up again, dragging brittle leaves across the porch like restless ghosts. And for the first time, I felt something crack, not in pain, but in truth. A truth that had been buried under years of silence and carefully constructed lies. The truth was, I hadn't walked away. I'd been erased. The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, the ceiling still dotted with faded glow-in-the-dark stars I stuck up when I was 10. I traced the shape of Orion with my eyes just like I used to, before things got complicated, before love had conditions. Downstairs, the smell of coffee drifted through the hallway. Grandma was already up, sitting at the small kitchen table in her robe, reading the obituaries like she always did. She didn't say good morning. Instead, she looked up, eyes clearer than the day before. I'm calling them, she said. I paused at the doorway. Who? She folded the newspaper slowly, like each crease was a decision. Your mother, your father, Brielle, and Henry's lawyer. I blinked. What? Why? She stood, suddenly full of purpose, and walked to the rotary phone on the kitchen wall, the same one Grandpa refused to replace even when the buttons started sticking. She picked up the receiver and began dialing. The clicks echoed like gunshots in the still air. Because I've had enough of pretending, she said. And your grandfather didn't raise us to cower. I watched her fingers, knotted with age but steady. She pressed the numbers deliberately, one by one. When the call connected, her voice turned sharp, cold, calculated. Elaine, she said to my mother, I need you, Thomas and Brielle here, at the farmhouse, 1 hour. A pause. I could only hear Grandma's end of the call, but I could imagine the reaction on the other side. Protests, confusion, entitlement. She cut it all off. No, it can't wait. Yes, it's about the estate. No, I won't explain on the phone. Be here, or don't, but this is happening. Then she hung up. No goodbye. No softening. Just the solid clack of the receiver landing like a gavel. My heart was racing. Grandma, are you sure about this? She looked at me, her mouth a thin line. Henry left instructions, specific ones. Said the lawyer was to read a letter in person, with everyone present. I never understood why until now. She walked to the sink and rinsed out her mug. Maybe he knew they'd twist it, like they twisted everything else. I sat down at the table, the one where Grandpa used to explain the constellations to me using sugar packets. I rubbed my thumb along a nick in the wood. I used to think it was just a scratch. Now I saw it for what it was, a mark left by years of quiet wait. Do you think they'll come? I asked. Oh, they'll come, Grandma said, drying her hands on a dish towel. People like them always show up when they think control is slipping. I stared out the window. The sky was bruised with morning clouds. The wind moved through the magnolias, stirring memories I wasn't ready for. Stay in the kitchen when they arrive, she told me. Let them feel the surprise. I nodded, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted truth. Raw, unvarnished, and laid bare in the house where I was once invisible. At 9:57, the first car pulled up. I recognized the white Lexus immediately, Mom's. Then Dad's black sedan. And finally, Brielle's baby blue convertible, the one she never shut up about on Instagram. I didn't move, I just listened. The sound of footsteps on the porch. The fake laughter in Mom's voice. Oh wow, it smells exactly the same in here. Dad's low murmur. I thought we settled everything already. Brielle's dramatic sigh. Seriously? This couldn't wait until the estate cleared? Then silence, followed by Grandma's voice, firm, unshaking. Please sit down. Mr. Whitaker is on his way. He'll be reading Henry's final instructions. I pictured them, confused, annoyed, still sure they were the main characters. They had no idea I was in the next room. And neither did I, how much that day would split the story of my life into before and after. The porch creaked again, another set of steps. A new voice, calm and crisp. This won't take long, but it must be done properly. Grandpa's lawyer had arrived. Then I heard it. Grandma's voice cutting through the air like a bell. Madeline, come in now. My breath caught. I stood. And as I stepped into the room, I saw all three heads turn toward me, like ghosts had walked in from the past. But I wasn't the ghost this time. I was the reckoning. When I stepped into the living room, the air shifted. Mom's smile collapsed before it fully formed. Dad's hand twitched at his collar, that same nervous tick he used when his authority was questioned. And Brielle froze like someone had just ripped the script from her hands mid-performance. I didn't flinch. I walked slowly, deliberately, and sat down in the armchair Grandma had placed across from them, directly across, like a witness facing the defendants. Mr. Whitaker, Grandpa's lawyer, gave me a curt nod as he unlatched his leather briefcase. The room was silent except for the rustle of paper and the hum of the old ceiling fan clicking every third rotation. This, he began, is the last will and testament of Henry E. Rhodes, recorded, notarized, and sealed per his explicit instructions. Mom shifted in her seat. Dad folded his arms. Brielle rolled her eyes with the kind of arrogance only someone who thought they owned the world could manage. In addition to the legal directives, Mr. Whitaker continued, Mr. Rhodes left behind a personal letter. He requested it be read aloud in the presence of his family, no exceptions. He pulled out a cream-colored envelope, worn at the corners, Grandpa's signature scrawled across the flap. But first he began with the legal portions. To my wife, Edith Rhodes, he read, I leave the entirety of our family home and surrounding acreage, along with the necessary funds for her continued comfort and care. She knows where to find the rest. Grandma didn't blink. She simply nodded. Mr. Whitaker flipped the page. To my granddaughter, Madeline Rhodes. The room tightened. I felt it in my bones, my heartbeat in my throat. I leave the Rhodes Climate Annex located at 82 Blue River Road, including all research equipment, financial accounts, and active intellectual property under Rhodes Agricultural Solutions. A sound escaped Brielle, part gasp, part choke. She sat bolt upright. He gave her the annex, she hissed, the entire facility? Mr. Whitaker didn't pause. And the remainder of my estate, financial holdings, stocks, retirement, shall be divided equally between my granddaughters, Madeline and Brielle Rhodes. A bomb, quiet, precise. The fallout hit immediately. Brielle shot to her feet. No, that's not what was promised. Dad tried to calm her, but she turned on him. You told me, both of you, you said if I just kept showing up, smiled, played nice, pretended to care, it would all come to me. Mom's face drained of color. Sweetheart, let's just... Don't, Brielle snapped. You fed me a lie. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat. There is more, he said. A personal letter, written 1 week before Mr. Rhodes passed, to be read now. He unfolded the letter. The creases were soft from being held. Grandpa's handwriting, broad, confident, filled the page. To my dearest Madeline, my breath caught. If this is being read, I'm no longer beside you, but I am with you, always. I watched you grow up quiet, observant, asking questions that made others uncomfortable. That's how I knew you'd never settle for the version of life they tried to give you. The room went still. Even Brielle sat down, her arms crossed tight. You were the child they didn't know how to love. Not because you were unlovable, but because you glowed in ways they couldn't translate. And when they shut you out, you didn't break. You built. I couldn't stop the tears this time. I didn't wipe them away. I wanted them to see. I remember when you asked me to hide your science fair trophy, the letter continued. Said maybe if you didn't show it, they'd stop acting like you didn't belong. You belonged, Maddie. You always belonged. Across the room, Mom's shoulders collapsed in on themselves. Dad stared at the floor like it might swallow him. Brielle looked at me. Really looked. For the first time, not like a rival, but like someone realizing she wasn't the favorite after all. Grandpa's final words were simple. I leave you the annex not as a gift, but as a map. Go build the world they tried to keep from you. You already know how. Mr. Whitaker folded the paper slowly, reverently. And just like that, the silence that followed was louder than any scream. They couldn't look at me. Not really, because the truth was now a matter of record. And this time, no one could edit it. The letter settled onto the coffee table like a stone dropped in still water. No one moved. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat, quietly packed up his briefcase, and stood. That concludes Mr. Rhodes's will and final message, he said. Unless there are legal questions, I'll take my leave. No one had any. He nodded politely and left through the front door, leaving behind the storm. For a moment, no one said a word, then I did. I remember that science fair, I said, my voice low but clear. I spent 3 months studying bee communication patterns, built a whole simulated hive from scrap wood in the garage. I looked at my mom. You didn't come. You were at Brielle's dress rehearsal, for a ballet she'd already done 3 times. Her eyes didn't meet mine, her hands twisted in her lap. Dad opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. And you, I said, turning to Brielle, Every time I got excited about something, you rolled your eyes. Or worse, you made it a joke. Like being smart was something to be embarrassed about. She scoffed. Oh, come on. You always played the victim, Maddie. I worked for what I got. I showed up. No, I said, sharp now. You performed. There's a difference. Brielle's eyes narrowed. You think you're so pure? You disappeared for years. You didn't visit. You didn't call. I stood. I didn't disappear. I was cut off. You gave Grandpa a fake number. You told Grandma I didn't want to see her. You made sure I was never invited to anything, even his funeral. My mother gasped. That's not true. Grandma stood. Yes, it is. The room went quiet. I believed you, she said to my mother. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear, with anger. I believed you when you said Maddie had moved on, that she didn't want us. I watched Henry cry into his pillow because you told him she didn't care. Dad shifted in his seat. Look, Maddie got her education, her travel, her research. None of that was cheap. No, I said. And you didn't pay for it. Grandpa did. Every grant, every flight, every conference. You didn't even know what state I was living in half the time. I paused, my voice cracked. You made me feel like a burden. He made me feel seen. Brielle shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. I was told I'd get everything. I was the one who stayed. I was the good daughter. No, I said calmly. You were the convenient one, the easy one. I was the one they didn't understand, so they erased me. But Grandpa didn't. And now, I looked her in the eye. You don't get to erase me anymore. She stared at me, lips trembling. Why should you get anything? She said bitterly. Because you're some sad little genius with a lab coat and a sob story? I didn't flinch. No, I said. I get something because I earned his love, honestly, without pretending, and that's what you never understood. I turned to Grandma, expecting her to say something, but instead she walked forward. Slow, measured, steady. She looked Brielle in the eye. I regret that Henry left you anything, she said. You may have played the role, but it was never love. It was a transaction, and I'm ashamed I didn't see it sooner. Then she turned to all of them. Get out. Mom blinked. Mother, out, Grandma said again, louder now. Dad stood up, stunned. Brielle grabbed her purse and stormed past me, heels hitting the floor like gunshots. Mom and Dad followed, muttering something about legal challenges and emotions getting out of hand. But the truth was, they had nothing left to take. The door clicked shut behind them. Not slammed, not shouted, just final. I stood in the quiet room, breathing like I'd just surfaced from underwater. Grandma sat down slowly on the couch. Her hands, once shaking, were now calm. They'll come back, I whispered. They always do. Maybe, she said softly. But this time, we don't have to let them in. And in that moment, I realized they hadn't just tried to keep Grandpa from me. They had tried to take me from myself. And for the first time, they failed. 2 days later, I stood in front of it. The barn. From the outside, it looked almost exactly like it did when I was a child. Weathered wood, a sagging tin roof, and that old horseshoe still nailed above the doorframe like a half-forgotten charm. But when I opened the double doors, I realized something had changed. Everything. The inside had been transformed. Sunlight poured through a wall of glass panels on the eastern side, flooding the room with golden light. The floors were smooth concrete now, polished and new, with long workbenches lined up in neat rows. On them sat microscopes, data tablets, test tubes, solar meters, equipment I only dreamed of using during grad school. And in the center of the room, like a quiet declaration, was a leather-bound notebook. Mine. The one I thought I'd lost in college. Torn edges, coffee stains, filled with chaotic handwriting and tiny diagrams of bee-waggle dances. My knees nearly gave out. He hadn't just remembered me. He'd remembered everything. I sat on the edge of the central bench and opened the notebook. A folded note fell out. It was short. For when you're ready to build something no one can take away from you, love, Grandpa. That afternoon, I called 2 people I hadn't spoken to in years. Tara and Micah, fellow researchers from my university program. The kind who didn't just believe in science, but believed in people too. They were in. Within a month, we moved into the annex full-time. The 3 of us, working out of a barn-turned lab in rural Vermont, surrounded by acres of fields and the echoes of a man who'd seen the future before any of us did. We started small. A local grant to study micro-irrigation for drought-prone soil. Then a pilot project with a regional farming co-op, testing organic pest control systems using native pollinators. We made mistakes, burned equipment, cried over corrupted data files and grant rejections. But we kept showing up, because for the first time, we weren't working for someone else's approval. We were working from belief, from legacy, and from love. One night, after a long day troubleshooting the solar flow sensors, I stayed late. The annex was quiet. Micah had already gone home, Tara was on a video call with her sister. I sat by the glass wall, watching the last light fade over the distant pines. I pulled Grandpa's letter from my bag, the one I asked Mr. Whitaker to let me keep. I read it again, for maybe the 50th time. You wrote your own role, Madeline. That takes courage. It didn't just feel like encouragement. It felt like permission. That night, I outlined a new idea, something that had lived in my chest for years but never had a place to grow. A youth science initiative for the kids like me. The quiet ones, the overlooked, the ones whose questions were too big for the room. We called it the Little Inventors Program. In our first year, we had 12 students from 5 towns. Most of them had never touched a microscope. Some didn't even know what STEM stood for, but they were curious, and they were hungry. We gave each one a notebook, just like mine. Inside the cover, Grandpa's words. Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just chasing meaning. I was planting it. One idea at a time. The email came on a Thursday morning, tucked between a shipping invoice and a grant update. Subject line, request for visit, Rhodes Innovation Annex. The sender, Brielle Rhodes. I stared at the screen like it might blink first. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, or worse, a legal threat. Some last-ditch attempt to contest Grandpa's will, reopen old wounds, or stir up drama for a press release. But the message was short, uncharacteristically simple. Madeline, I'd like to see it. The work, if that's all right. Brielle. No threats, no sarcasm, no emojis. That alone unsettled me more than anything. Against my better judgment, I replied, tomorrow, 10 a.m. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer heels and perfectly coiffed curls. Her blazer hung loose on her shoulders, and her hair was pulled into a low, uncertain ponytail. No makeup, no perfume cloud trailing behind her like a statement. Just her, quiet, almost small. She stood beneath Grandpa's portrait in the entry hall, one I had hung with my own hands. He looked proud in it, holding the very notebook he'd saved for me. She stared at it longer than I expected. He always knew who you were, she said softly, even when I didn't, especially when I didn't. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I'd like to see the lab, she said. I led her through the annex without much conversation. Through the seedling greenhouses, the data rooms, the display wall where our little inventors had pinned up their first experiments in recycled frames. I watched her face more than I spoke. She didn't smile, she didn't frown, but she listened. In the community garden, a mother and son were laughing near the compost bins. A teenage girl was harvesting kale with dirt under her nails and stars in her eyes. Brielle stopped walking. She watched in silence, then looked at me, her voice cracked. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I nodded slightly. I don't expect an apology. She swallowed. Her hands wouldn't stop fidgeting, tugging at her sleeves, then crossing, then uncrossing again. I needed to see what he built for you, and what you built with it. That was the first moment in years that she felt human to me. Not a rival, not a role. Just a woman, uncertain, maybe even a little ashamed. I let her stay as long as she wanted. No lecture, no closure, just truth. And somehow that was enough. That summer she came back, volunteered at our youth camp once a week. At first she was stiff, correcting grammar on lab reports, over-explaining basic stats. But then something shifted. She stopped talking at the kids and started listening to them. They began calling her Coach B. She helped the shyest ones write presentations, showed them how to stand tall, how to breathe through the nerves, how to look people in the eye without shaking. At the end of the session, she handed me a manila folder. I wrote a communication guide, she said, almost embarrassed, for the ones who don't know how to speak up yet, thought it might help. I read it that night. It wasn't perfect, but it was gentle, thoughtful, real. And for the first time, I saw a version of my sister that didn't scare me. She never said I'm sorry, but she started showing up, consistently, quietly, authentically. And maybe, just maybe, that's better than any apology ever could be. Sometimes the people who should have seen you never did. Sometimes the love you spent years chasing was never real to begin with. But here's the truth. You don't need their permission to become who you were meant to be. You don't need their applause to matter. Because real love, real legacy, it doesn't come with conditions or performance reviews. It comes quietly, through actions, through belief, and through people, like my grandfather, who leave you more than an inheritance. They leave you a map. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told to stay small while someone else got the spotlight, then this story was for you. And if it reached you, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, because sometimes your story is the one someone else has been waiting to hear.